Hello, everybody. Good morning. Thank you for joining us on this edition of The Advance. I'm Brandon Waltens with Michael Quinn Sullivan back with us again this week.
Nice to be with you, Brandon, and all of you nice folks. Came dashing into town again. Look, I'm not doing any more flights that require a Monday night, Tuesday morning flight. No more. That's absolutely crazy.
That's right.
So we ended up starting a little late this morning. Sorry about that for those of you who are really sticklers for the 9 a.m. start. But look, you got to get here when you get here. So here we are.
Yes, and we've got another banner week, at least a real milestone week in the legislature. Whereas, we talked about it before. We're past the halfway point. We're starting to see activity in the House. And one of the big events, it's really the only bill that they're required to pass, right? Mm-hmm. Which is the budget, which is getting a lot of attention from all sides.
Yeah. So, it's always been fascinating to me. I've been watching the Texas legislature for going on 30 years, a little bit of a break in there. But when everyone talks about budget debates, they're always talking about what happens in the House. Mm-hmm. The Senate passes the budget also, the Senate, but it's the House where you have these very public debates over amendments and changes and fights over the policy, because ultimately, while it's called a budget, the budget is not it is a dollars and cents document, but it's really a policy document. Yes. It's really about policy. Everything government does costs money, and so as a result, the budget is where you can really see these really interesting discussions about the policies of the state of Texas.
Yes, and you compare. It couldn't be more different the way this happens in the Senate and the House. Now, alternating sessions. So, every other year, the House or the Senate will start the budget process this session in the Senate. So they passed their budget about 2-3 weeks ago with no amendments. There was actually, I think, one amendment that was offered and withdrawn. So no amendments was a pretty fast process.
Right.
Compare that to the House, where there are 393 amendments that have been pre-filed ahead of the debate, which is a lot, but it's pretty normal when you go look back at how many usually get filed.
So, Brandon, you choose a phrase there. These amendments have been pre-filed. What that means, of course, is that with every piece of legislation, there is a rule of debate. It's it's the boilerplate rule of debate, but they will occasionally set special rules for these big things like the budget. They'll have rules that are debated actually a week or so ago, setting the terms for how we're going to enter into the process. And one of those things with the budget is the pre-filing of amendments. So there's, you can start getting into really technical stuff, which we won't do this morning. But for the most part, we now know right now, today, these 390 something amendments, exactly what they're going to possibly be debating on the floor. And there's a lot that they're looking to do: property tax relief, a school choice debate, and various things.
That's the interesting thing, because you talk about the budget, like you said, it's not, it's dollars and cents, obviously, and there's criticism here because this budget, $340 billion.
Largest state budget in Texas history, by far.
And what you see as a common theme among a lot of amendments, particularly from some conservative members, is, okay, where can we take money from one area and put it into, a lot of amendments talking about, let's move it into property tax relief. Let's move it into school property tax compression. One of those areas that you've seen a few amendments offered on is the Texas lottery, right? Taking, okay, let's zero out the Texas Lottery Commission, or let's at least take some of their money and put it towards property tax relief. You're seeing some of that. You've also seen amendments pre-filed that would defund some of the public university systems, but specifically citing their DEI and radical gender ideology courses that many of them offer. You see some of those that have been filed, but then you also see Democrats following them as well. You mentioned the school choice debate. We don't have school choice on the floor of the House yet. They're not going to be voting on school choice, but there's a little bit of a test vote that is likely to take place as you have Democrat Donna Howard filing an amendment that would essentially prevent funds from being used for any sort of school choice program. And so that vote on that amendment, if it's brought up, will sort of serve as a bellwether for what school choice will look like when they get to it maybe here in the coming weeks.
And let's be clear, this is not a new thing that
No.
Donna Howard is doing this week. In the past, Abel Herrera, who's no longer in the Texas House, would introduce this very same amendment, and it has passed session after session after session in the Texas House. So again, that's what makes this week going to be interesting. One, will Dustin Burrows allow there to be debate over that amendment? Will the membership allow that debate to continue?
Right.
And then how that vote goes will probably tell you a lot about what's going to happen with the governor's priority of school choice whenever they get it to the floor in the next couple of weeks.
Right. I think that's a great segue to another fight that's been happening behind the scenes. It's really been happening the entire session, which is school choice, right? You back up to the primary elections last year where Governor Greg Abbott made it his top issue. There's been a lot of members that have been replaced, some of them because they oppose school. And so what you had happen last week, which is out of the House Public Education Committee, Senate Bill 2, and one of the big changes, they made some changes to it. It's not the exact same bill that was, they heard testimony on a few weeks ago in there. Then it went till I think 6 in the morning or something like that, something crazy. One of the big changes, actually, because of some attention that have been placed on this issue by conservatives, is saying, okay, we're going to specifically say that these funds can't be used for illegal aliens. That's something that some conservatives have pushed for. There's some other clarifying language in there. That passed out of the House Public Education Committee. It's got a majority of members as co-authors right now. So you would think that it would have no trouble passing. And yet we haven't seen that bill get to the floor yet. We're told that maybe could be next week or the week after.
Well, significantly, not only has it gotten to the floor, it also has not appeared yet before the calendars committee for them to set to the floor. And this is one of those pieces of legislation you can probably see them adopting a special rule around for the debate, that sort of thing. This issue of adding the exemption preventing dollars going to illegal aliens, a number of folks have said, look, the problem with a lot of legislation in the past in Texas is that if there is one small part of the legislation that draws some sort of legal challenge, it prevents the entire thing from taking effect. And so there's been a lot of discussion around adding what's called severability clauses, where if someone's filing a lawsuit against Part 1, it doesn't affect Parts 2, 3, 4, and 5 from going to effect. And so I think you're going to hear a lot of those kind of phrases in the debate over school choice in the Texas House, this idea of severability. How do you make sure that even if you're carving out, someone's filed a lawsuit about the illegal alien carve out, how do they keep the entire program, though, going otherwise? There's going to be a lot of debate over this. It's kind of a new thing in Texas.
Yeah.
The school choice bill is going to be a lawsuit magnet.
I'm sure.
Assume it's going to be a lawsuit magnet. Now, the other magnet, of course, for politicians besides the lawsuits are Hollywood starlets. Now sometime, maybe today, maybe tomorrow, an expansion of the state's film incentive program, the Hollywood subsidy. We've got that coming sometime in the next 2 weeks, or within the next week, maybe as early as today, with the Texas Senate looking to take that program from, 20 to $500 million.
Yes, every 2 years for the next 10 years. So really, adding up to $2.5 billion over the next decade.
And the criticism of the program in the past has been, it's been a pure just handout money for production. So you often found the state paying for movies that went, used to say straight to Blockbuster. They used to go straight to video. They're hidden on channels you don't get on cable, you don't subscribe to on your Roku device. But these are shows you weren't seeing, or they were commercials, and in many cases things that would have been filmed here anyway. My favorite over the years was seeing the sheer number of H-E-B and Whataburger ads being filmed in Texas. Like, well, where else are they going to film their ads? This new this new thing is not only continuing to do that production stuff, but starting to follow kind of in what Georgia and New Mexico have done of these kind of a one-time infrastructure spending. So a little bit different spin on it. It'll be interesting to see how the Texas Senate goes. Certainly, when you see Hollywood dying, and you see the impact, though, that film and television have on culture, there's certainly something, I think, attractive maybe to folks, Brandon. And it's easy to say, oh, they'd find their picture taken with Matthew McConaughey, but there is something
attractive. Many of them did,
and many of them did. But there is something attractive, I think, to a number of folks about, could Texas begin to shape the messaging of these movies by virtue of the state of Texas. So it's going to be a lot of debates, not only across the chamber members who are opposed to it. So it'll be interesting to see how this legislation shapes out.
Absolutely. And assuming that passes likely this week in the Texas Senate, that would actually bring the Senate one step closer to legislative priorities. He's saying that the Senate will have passed, is on track to have passed all of them by next week, which, you love them or hate them, right? They certainly got the priorities done. They said they would do. And now the ball is in the House's court. Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick has said that he has been pleased with what Speaker Dustin Burrows has been saying about many of these priorities, including school choice and other issues. But he's also noted that, the clock is ticking, and it's hard to believe, but we're now starting to get to a point where you really measure the rest of the session in a matter of weeks, right? And so you've got 7-8 weeks left in the session. The clock is really starting to tick on some of these priorities, and so far in the House we haven't seen anything that I would call substantive pass. They had 2 calendars last week. They maybe passed 8 or 9 bills. Not on issues that I would say were the issues that most people would care about. Not that they were necessarily bad bills, but but very small things. Some constitutional amendments to ban taxes that don't exist, which is I'm for. But at the same time, people are saying, well, where's our meaningful property tax relief? Where's some meaningful border security legislation, election, all of this stuff. That's where I think a lot of the attention is going to be over the next several weeks.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us here in the advance. We look forward to seeing you next Tuesday. Have a great day.